What's up, Neki?
Hello.
Koviki talk time. We're a
Koviki.
couple years into this, and we're still the only PI podcast, PI series that continues to run and inform the PI community about COVID-19. We've been all the way through, well, we've been through a census, an election, all kinds of things. And we're at this point, we kind of want to check back in. So it's November 28th, a few days after Thanksgiving. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. A month ago, President Biden got his updated booster shot. The winter season is upon us. Flu season is here. RSV is an issue. COVID is still here. The government reports, I think, 2,200 deaths from COVID last week and down from 8,000 from last year. So significantly down. But where are we right now in the PI community? And specifically those at high risk over 50, 55, and then, where are we as a community? So that's the show today. Naki, do you want to introduce our very special guest?
Our special award winning everything in the news all the time. Our guest today is Dr. Raynald Samoa, of course. He completed his adult endocrinology fellowship at Los Angeles County University of Southern California. He is board certified in pediatrics, internal medicine, and adult endocrinology. His primary major area of research includes appetite modulation and its effect on obesity in minority communities. Dr. Samoa also serves on President Biden's Advisory Commission on Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders. He's the lead for Happy Doctors, Healing Association of Pacific Islander Doctors, which is part of the national nonprofit organization NAOPO. Dr. Samoa recently won the RWJF APIC Award for Health Equity in Boston. And we'll find out so much more and everything that he's up to and a lot of good information about COVID-19 for our Pacific Islanders. Welcome, Dr. Samoa.
Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure to hang out with you too.
Yay, yay, yay. How was your Thanksgiving, or where are you headed to all dressed up? Just events?
Thanksgiving's with family. We have people are came in from out of town. So
Nice.
I'm just happy that I didn't have to host.
Oh, me
So, you
too.
know, I can wash a couple dishes. I don't mind that at all.
Right.
But hosting, that's a different level. I'd still be cleaning.
Awesome. Well, where do we start? Like, we started this like 2, 3 years maybe,
Yeah,
right? You were like, "Oh,
right.
hey, do you think you can?" And then it was all problems
We
after that.
Right? We were actually in an Airbnb
Mhm.
in um what was it?
Vallejo. Vallejo.
Vallejo. Yeah, we're in Vallejo in an Airbnb just talking about like the COVID in China, in
Right.
Wuhan. And then, it just who would have predicted?
Yeah, who would have predicted? Who would have predicted? But we're kinda, um better off than a couple of years ago, but, a couple of years ago, which it's sad to say, like, 2 years okay, so 2 years ago, we started this, Koviki Talk, and what happened was we were getting updates just because, Pacific Islanders were dying at a high rate.
Right.
So we were trying to get them accurate information and data as quickly as possible. And so you and Dr. Nia came up with Koviki Talk, um, and forced us, forced us into it. Not really. You asked, and of
Yeah.
course we were more than happy to oblige. But tell us, where are we? Where are we now? And what's going on?
Well, so with the introduction of the vaccines, um, and just sort of the nature of how these viruses kind of play out, we saw a huge decrease um, of COVID. But we have to be very careful because the last 2 years, even with the vaccine, we saw spikes around the holiday season.
Mm.
And so um, I think it, um, it's fair to say that like the last time I had COVID was in January of this year. So, it fits right in that timeline of during the holiday season, people tend to gather a little bit more,
Mm.
not just with loved ones, but when you're in like crowded shopping malls and a lot more church functions around
Airports.
airports,
Mm.
so we for a lot of those reasons, those crowding situations um may be one of the reasons why we see spikes during the holidays. And this is no different. I think last time we started talking about the rates increasing around November,
Mm.
leading up to Thanksgiving, and then it just culminated in December and January, and then finally towards the end of January, February, we started to see that spike come back down. Um, and so, you know, we're starting to see the rise again. Although maybe not as like obvious as it was last year, but
Mm.
it's still there. It's still doing that steady climb. The difference I think between last year and this year is the flu it has been a lot more prevalent this go around. And I think that's one of the things is that it's hard to tell the difference between the COVID and the flu, because the symptoms overlap a lot, and so it's hard to tell now. Like everyone's coughing, right?
Mm.
Everyone's like everyone's clearing their throat. Everyone is got the sniffles, and so it's really really hard now to sort of like identify anyone that has symptoms, because it's almost everybody.
Yeah.
So you know, because of that situation, it's probably even more important to be vaccinated. And just like just as what was expected, with variants and not understanding like how long the immune system is going to be able to keep up um, immune status with COVID. Um, we're starting to see the rise, and so it's important to sort of get boosted. Just especially if you're older,
Mm.
um, older than 55 is definitely a group. But because, like I said, we're starting to see a lot more symptoms in the workplace, and in like there's a lot more gathering. I would probably recommend, like, if you're an adult, it's probably best to get boosted to maintain your immunity.
So the booster will maintain the immunity.
Right, right. So if you do catch COVID, um, in those situations, I probably would hold off for 3 months,
Mhm.
before getting a booster.
Mm.
That's according to like the CDC guidelines. Um, and so, yeah, besides them, there's other special situations. Immunocompromised people have um, slightly different recommendations regarding their booster schedule. So it's good to follow up with your physician if you have an immunocompromised condition. Um, there's also medications if especially if you're going through things like chemotherapy,
Mm.
or other types of treatments where your immune system will be suppressed. There's medications your doctors can put you on to help decrease your risk of contracting it.
Oh, yeah.
There's every shield. Um, I work at a cancer hospital. We continuously give every shield to some of our patients who are more vulnerable. To keep them from getting it.
And that's Evi Shield?
EVU, EVU.
EVU. That's
Yeah,
good to know. I'm writing that down. I'm writing that
right.
down.
Yeah.
Mm.
And the CDC has some, like they're turning their content over a lot quicker. So, if you want sort of the latest up to date recommendations regarding you specifically, it's
Mhm.
good to check in, with the CDC, um, uh, just to make sure there's nothing that will surprise you in regards to the vaccination schedule. And they can also, I think the website, I mean, I don't want to sound like a CDC commercial, but I think the website does allow does show you where to get the nearest boot, like where there's um, sites set up for you to get a booster.
Right. And vaccines.gov, I think that is the one of the main sources too, to find where you can get a vaccine or booster near you. You just have to put in your zip code, which is convenient.
Oh, look at that! I didn't know that. Thank
Oh,
you.
right.
Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
that PSA.
Good
Right?
information.
You're welcome. But
So, Dr. Samoa, we've had different variants emerge. Can you talk a little bit about like if you get the vaccine and you're up to date with your boosters and the vaccine and the variants continue to emerge, is that does that give you a level of protection or is it just, if there's a new variant, it doesn't help at all? Like talk a little bit about like what would happen if variants continue and you're up to date with your boosters. Do you have a better level of protection?
Yes. So there is some degree of protection that you get, like crossover, because although there are different variants, there's some traits of every COVID strain that are similar. So you do have some protection, even if it's not aimed at that particular strain, right? And so, a lot of times you'll hear people say they got the vaccine, but they still caught COVID from a different strain, but it was milder, and so that's kind of how it works. There's some homology amongst all the strains, being that they're all COVID-19, with you know, just some differences that make them unique.
okay, so I learned something new. Like, and I hear that all the time. I took the vaccine, I got the booster, I still got COVID, but it's a different strain of COVID.
It could be, but like you said, like people react very differently to vaccines. That's why the rate, although high, the vaccination, I mean the rate's not 100, right? Because there's a lot of different things that goes into how well your body fights off a virus that it's immune to.
Okay.
Um, and so the the I think one of the benefits that we get as a community from everyone getting vaccinated is that there's less to spread, right? There's less COVID around to give to each other, if we're all vaccinated. Yeah, and so because like I said, it's not 100%. It's not to say that you get the vaccine, you're gonna immediately never get COVID. Like that would be any immunologist would tell you that that's just not going to happen. But what it does do when we're all vaccinated, it really decreases the risk of you being exposed to COVID.
And getting severe symptoms.
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of good enough data that shows you that the vaccinations tend to, um, when you do get COVID, the symptoms tend to be milder.
Okay.
What would you say? Look, so now we're a couple years. I mean, we're 2.5 years well past. We're past 2.5 years into it. Um, when looking back at the whole thing, are you confident? Do you have a level of confidence that if something similar were to happen in the future, that we would be more prepared or more readily able to deal with a pandemic? And then, how do you think we did? Really, I mean, as a not necessarily PI community, but the world, the health organizations, the country in general. How do you think that overall it was handled? And do you think we're better prepared if the something different than COVID, but same idea happens again?
Like a different pandemic. I
Yeah.
I think I think we'll be more prepared, because a lot of the infrastructure that was needed to deal with a widespread pandemic um, will be in place. Um, you know, I guess it depends on the administration, but the CDC being in full force and doing the world surveillance they used to do before the pandemic, that was a big reason why we were protected from a lot of pandemics. Um, and so I think, we don't have to convince anybody how important that surveillance is. Actually, we do because people have short memories.
Right.
Um, and so, as a community, I would say we would get a D. And it was it's I think uh the the people who lived through the Spanish flu epidemic, if they saw what happened during COVID, they would probably be so angry. They would probably be so angry with us. It was like because they dealt with a pandemic. They were able to stop a pandemic in its tracks because they all sort of did what they needed to do. And so um, I mind you, they were motivated a lot by the rampant death that was going on, but they were still motivated enough to do so. Unfortunately, some of our biggest obstacles during COVID are still here. We still, in fact, it might have gotten worse. A lot of our anti-science rhetoric, a lot of a lot of the sort of misinformation that was given to delegitimize health experts, um, that's still here. And it's gonna be here forever now because there are people that profited off of it. There are people that are gaining something from it. So we haven't really sort of there's no sort of reason why people shouldn't believe that, because it's very, I don't know, like I think the next pandemic that comes around, um it it might even be harder, because at least we could, like, the camps weren't so solid. We had like some inroads into some places, but now, you know the even though we know more and the infrastructure is there, the infrastructure for the obstacles are there too, and they've only gotten stronger.
I was I was disappointed that it seemed to take on a political, like politics became part of science,
Yeah,
and it's not part of science, but in some people's minds, politics became part of science,
yeah.
um, and that I think that I would agree with that assertion that the blueprint was created on how to navigate out of a pandemic, but then the blueprint was also created of how to, um, I don't know, I'm gonna say resist. That's probably the wrong word, but how to not slow it down, but you know what I'm saying. Like there's another blueprint that was laid out there too. And to your
Oh
point,
yeah, the
no
blueprint to
consequence.
divide us was
Right.
also constructed as well, and unfortunately, because the people have profited off of our division, um, it's going to stay.
No doubt. Um, so with RSV and the flu, like flu season, right? So COVID's still here. It's the winter season. You have more gathering and those kind of things. Is the flu shot, is that something I hear? Of course you hear all kinds of things on social media.
Right.
But I hear things like, oh, don't get the flu shot, or you can't get both, or don't get your booster shot if you got your flu shot. Um, is there anything to the two shots or timing or one affects the other or anything of that nature that the Pacific Islander community should be aware of in this time of year?
Not on paper. We
Mm,
don't have a lot of evidence in Pacific Islanders, but that's not new. But if you look at sort of general data, we really haven't heard a lot of uh, com- you know negative side effects from having both vaccines together. Um, you know, it's I it's one of those things too where I think people were hesitant against the vaccine to begin with. And so, there's a lot of sort of hesitancy in getting both vaccines at the same time. Now that being said, you know, some people have had reactions to the vaccine. Like myself included. Like I don't feel great after I get the vaccine. And I think that part of that is my immune system reacting to it. Like um, I'm kind of happy that I'm like, okay, I'm immune. I can tell I'm immune because my body just reacted to it. But I know, it's not the greatest feeling in the world for at least like 24 hours. Um, and so if you're one of those, then yeah, maybe separate the vaccine. Like,
mm,
you don't get any medals for getting them at the same time. And so like I've never reacted to the flu vaccine, which makes me nervous because that means there's so many flu virus strains that I'm not immune to,
right.
and so I mean, you think once I would be like, oh yeah, I got sick after the flu vaccine, I'm immune to that strain. I have never had a reaction to the flu vaccine.
Oh,
Um,
geez.
which means that speaks just to how many millions of strains there are of the flu.
Right.
And so yeah, so on paper, like I said, there's not really anything that sort of speaks to not being able to get both of them together. But if you're hesitant, it's okay to like separate them by a week or 2 weeks.
Okay. Uh, Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say it's a good idea to talk to your doctor about that.
Yeah,
Talk to your doctor if you have
talk
any,
to your doctor. Exactly, right?
but
They know stuff.
definitely talk to your doctor. I love that you said because well, a lot of people that I know that have gotten the vaccine were like, I got sick right after, but it's us getting sick or a little, have some symptoms afterwards. It's our body fighting, right? Doesn't I mean, so it's letting us know that it's working, right? That our body is fighting off.
Right. So a lot of times people think that when they get sick from a vaccine, it's the actual virus itself that's
Mhm.
replicating and causing symptoms. Hardly ever is that the case. Like we because the vaccine is not a live virus. Sometimes you can get that if you have like a live virus, but it's really, really rare because they're attenuated.
Mm.
Um, so the when you get a reaction, most likely it's your immune system sort of responding to the vaccine. And so, if you start to react, chances are you're immune. You know,
Okay.
and so because like one of the things we give for that is a steroid. It's kind of like an mild immunosuppressant. um, you still get the antibodies, but it helps with the symptoms. And but that just sort of tells you kind of what's going on. If that makes it get better, then it's your immune system that's causing it.
Good to know. Good to know. And if if you're not vaccinated at all, and we kind of know the answer because we gone through this, but we would like to hear it again from a medical profession. If you don't get the vaccine or the booster and you catch COVID, what is it? Low chance, high chance that you'd get severe symptoms and get hospitalized? What do we have
Um,
data? Especially Pacific Islanders
right.
50 and older.
You can have any three of those presentations because th- remember before the vaccine, there were some people who were catching COVID that felt nothing,
Right.
right? And then there were people who passed away from COVID. And
Mm.
so it's really, really hard to tell which one you're going to get when you get COVID. Luckily for us, though, we can reduce our risk of getting COVID with the vaccine. But there's also medications that you can use to help fight COVID when if you get infected. So it's good to let your doctor know, um, you know, if you do have if you're worried that you have COVID, um, or if you have any trouble breathing, definitely go seek immediate medical attention because there are things that we have at our disposal that we didn't have before. I
Oh,
think
that's
Paxlovid is one of the antivirals that we use for COVID, and people can get treated right away. And it helps produce milder symptoms if that's the case.
awesome. And do we know what the numbers are? Are we way better off than we were last year or 2 years ago?
Oh yeah, yeah, we're way better off right now. But like I said, this was sort of where things were starting to creep last time,
Yes.
and we're creeping now.
Yeah.
We're starting to see rises in infection rates. Um, you know, uh, like just in our hospital, we actually were told not to gather outside of the hospital.
Oh.
Not they strongly recommended against any um, gathering outside of the off campus because the rates are starting to go up.
Hmm.
And like I'm the senior warden for our Episcopal church, and it made us caution as well because we have people asking us why do we mask, and um, we made the decision to stay masked throughout the holidays
Hmm.
um, for services.
That
Yeah.
could give you a decent idea of what common sense is if the staff at the City of Hope are taking care and being careful about gathering. That might be something to think about.
Right, right.
There's people there probably have a pretty good idea of what's healthy and what's not. Um, so right now with the PI rates, because of I would assume the comorbidities and the pre-existing conditions, our rates will always, not always, but I mean generally trend higher than the overall population. As we see the rise in rates, is it do we stay kind of in the same in correlation to the rest of the population, or do you think we've made grounds as a community where we don't rise quite as much? Or I mean, if there's not enough data out there, then we're asking you to come up with answers that take data. I understand that.
Well, I still think we're not at the point yet that we have that kind of granular data to say that for sure. Um, I will tell you, in those places where we have larger populations, like California, Arkansas, Utah, we still have sort of the highest rates of COVID. Um, but unlike last year, where it was just kind of across the board, where NHPI had the highest rates, there are some places where we don't have the highest rates anymore. Um, but we're starting to see the tick happen again, like in Hawaii. The rates are they don't have the NHPI don't have the highest rates in Hawaii anymore, but it's starting to slowly go up. So you know, we still have to be very mindful. Um, you know, the numbers aren't anywhere near they were a year ago. A lot of that has to do with the hard work of community-based organizations to get communities vaccinated. Um, Based on sort of what we found in the survey, where there was high vaccine hesitancy in different parts of the country in Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, our community organizations have been able to outpace, the vaccination rates. They've been able to sort of overcome a lot of that hesitancy with their engagement and get communities vaccinated at high rates. So, you know, that it's one of the there's some publications coming out that are showing that, like, what the community was able to do during the pandemic. And it's it warms me. It's there's a lot of sort of uh, overcoming adversity, and people really, doing great work in our communities to get things done for us, and it's I have kind of like the backstage view, and I had the honor of seeing people do it from the get-go. People kind of chasing their public health officials around, on Zoom and in the parking lots to like get things done, and then people sort of working with state agencies and federal agencies to sort of get things done, and you guys working in getting the word out, and making COVID information less scary for our people. All of those efforts have mounted into helping us get through the worst of this pandemic. And so it's a beautiful thing to see our people show up for each other, and then sort of see the we don't really give enough attention to the fruits of that labor. um, but I see it, and I speak about it every chance I get. I'm kind of a broken record in that regards, uh, because it's important. It's important for people to know, because when we're not talking about COVID, and we're talking about cancer, and we're talking about mammograms, and we're talking about colonoscopies, or
Mhm.
we're talking about heart attacks and heart disease, um, it's the same people.
Yeah,
It's the same people that show up to do the work. You know, and it's 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 really sort of humbling to see, um, uh, people just show up, and I'm honored by that.
me too. I think we always talk about, as soon as the pandemic happened, everyone just broke out into, let's get to the cities, let's get to the counties, let's get to the states. Let's disaggregate our numbers so that we can be seen and we can be heard. And
Yeah.
especially during the pandemic, we say this all the time, we're dying at a high rate. How do we help our community? And I think that's what got a lot of the Pacific Islander community leaders and people that weren't community leaders just jumped right in and started saving lives, really saving lives with the clinics that were happening, with they were having vaccine clinics, getting
Oh
people
yeah.
that speak the language to go and
Right.
stand in line or stand there so that we can translate the information. It was a beautiful thing to see.
It was, every now and then I catch like old photos. No, old. They're like a year, 2 years,
Right.
2.5 years old. But like I'll see something on either social media or on my email, of like uh uh Rita
Yeah.
Satini, when she was sort of like trying to get the utility companies to defer payments because people weren't working, that. Or when I see like the sort of Marshallese food drives, and the Portland testing sites, all of
Yes.
those were when you look at them in aggregate, you may not be able to sort of appreciate all the little work, all the little steps that went into that one picture. But like I said, I get this really sort of beautiful view of what those pictures mean,
Mm.
um, and so I look at I get to see sort of like churches kind of coming back together, um, and they'll do their 1 year, that the 1 year celebration, like after someone's passed,
Mhm.
and that picture makes me so happy because I remember what the funeral was like.
Mm,
When we're at the height of COVID and people are trying to like gather but stay safe,
right.
all of that navigation. And when you see the pictures now of people sort of like gathering and they're joyous, you know, um, we know the other pictures. We know all the pictures that led up to that picture,
Mm,
and so yeah, it's very, it's one episode should be just purely that. You guys should just do like a photo album or photo like a video montage of like all that work, you know.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I remember early on that, and it kind of breaks my heart for those families that had to have funeral via Zoom.
yeah,
You had like 10 people, family members, and then everybody else had to join via Zoom. And we definitely do not want to go back to those times
yeah,
because we had a hard time doing that. I mean,
oh yeah,
we still have a hard time not gathering because of our culture. We want to pay respects. We've got to show our face for this falalave or your mud.
right,
Right, or your mud, but
right,
that was a very hard time to
yeah,
watch our family members grieve online, and you can't even do, you know what I mean? Like, how do you do that? And so we don't wanna go back to that
yeah,
time, and so we ask and we plead that I think we've done a lot better with numbers, but we're still I believe you said that we're still high.
right,
Not as high as, another community, but I believe we're still high. And especially this holiday season that's coming up, numbers always rise during
yeah,
this holiday season. So we just are
right,
just trying to protect our elders, our whole
yeah.
family.
So
Um,
this you bring up a really good point in that we have to remember to be responsible. That if you're coughing, and mind you, like I know a ton of people. My parents are guilty of this, like nonstop. If you're coughing, don't go. Don't put the community at this inconvenient place to ask you to stay home, because sometimes they won't. They'll be like, they'll love you too much that they'll let you stay, and you're just spreading COVID and the flu all over the place.
Yeah,
And so we I I think it's that whole thing of like remembering where we were, like you said.
mhm,
um you know so the thing about like when I go to places and I talk about health equity and I talk about sort of like policy changes to help fight inequities, we talk numbers, we talk data, we talk policy. Um, but this last time I was very clear to them. It's like, look, I know that health equity is a buzzword, and it means something to an academic person and a researcher, but I will tell you that's not how our communities look at health equity. Like, my people don't look at data when they think about health equity. They think about all the birthdays lost. They think about who's not going to be at the wedding.
right.
They think about who they're going to be sad about because when they look, they're not there during Christmas, right?
Mm,
They'll, those are the ways that health equity, the pain of health in inequity, is what is how we describe health,
mm,
and so um, we have to do kind of a better job on that side of things to make sure that that's how we talk about health equity,
right,
right? That we talk about it in the means of quality lost, about memories are that won't happen,
right,
um, because of these inequities, and so because I think that's the thing about when we talk about COVID and stopping COVID and reducing rates is, you know, people, Samoans don't care. Pacific Islanders for the most part don't care about numbers.
Right.
I mean, that's a generalization. There's a lot of people. I don't mean to offend the ones that actually do care, but there's a large percentage of us that don't care about numbers. You
Mm,
know, and so we have to sort of like make sure they understand it on their level.
right.
That it's not about numbers. There's there's so many people that are lost. That it's directly because of COVID.
Right.
That that sadness is not just going to go away. Um, because the rates come down, right? Like,
Right.
or that you got vaccinated. So we have to make sure that we understand that about each other. You know, and, and so yeah, it's very. I heard a pastor say, like, um, that he was talking about um, um, walking in the Garden of Gethsemane, you know, and when Jesus said, uh, "Take the cup from me," right? You know, and it wasn't right, because sometimes the answer to our prayer is no. You know, that we're supposed to learn something from what we're being burdened by. Like, and so you know I found that to be incredibly helpful. Like, okay, I kind of get it. Like, it's not supposed to be easy for us. There's
Right.
something we're supposed to learn about this, not just individually but as a community. um and so you know it's I think that was part of the whole surprise to me about COVID and the pandemic was um, was seeing the beautiful response to it, um, was part of the reason why we had to go through it.
Right.
So true. So true. I think the thought of some of the greatest gifts from God are unanswered prayers, right?
Right.
Because then we learn, um, we put more tools in our toolbox. I've always asked this, early on in Koviki Talk, I had asked this, and I continue to ask it. So we think about all the really good things that we put together, right? The being able to mobilize, being able to participate in things that we may not really know enough about, but we'll roll up our sleeves and jump in and make things happen. Um, we learned a lot, right? So, do you think we keep that being an endocrinologist, working with diabetes, appetite modulation, uh, all those kind of things that are big in the Pacific Islander community? Do you think we can take these tools as we, you know, put COVID maybe not in our rear view mirror, but in our side view mirror, and use those tools to continue on with better health outcomes for us as a group? Speaking about it the way that we should, but do you see that we're going to be able to take the tools forward with us as we go?
I hope so. I definitely hope so. Looking, it's sad to say, but like NOPA was kind of born out of the pandemic, right?
Mm,
And um, mind you, we have never been this united between Hawaii, the continent,
mm,
and the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands. Um, and we've been around forever, but we needed something of great threat to our people for us to gather together, and to gather together meaningfully. And so that infrastructure is one of the tools that will come out for us to use to fight the other things that threaten our quality of life, all those other chronic diseases you talked about, all those other social determinants of health that influence those chronic diseases, you know. And so even the which I'm about to ask you my favor after we talk, but
mm,
um
mm.
the way we look at data, like
Yeah. Yeah.
The way I look at data now is almost it's very very different from when the pandemic started. You
Right.
know, and uh, I have to tell you, a lot of the things I learned during the pandemic it's unbelievably useful for chronic disease. I
Mm,
learned through the hardest moments during the pandemic. You know,
mm,
um, there were times when I was humbled and scolded um, by our community, and rightfully so, because I think for me to sort of learn what I needed to learn about um, the data equity and what we need to do as a people, I had to learn the hard way, you know, because I, the the silo I live in, the academic arena that I function in, um, makes you blind to a lot of things, and to really sort of unravel uh, data so that our people can use it, and use it to make things better. You have to understand it at the ground level. You have to understand it from somebody who knows nothing about data. You also have to start to understand more about it at the level of the data scientist. You know, so not only did I have to sort of like understand how data is collected and reported at different levels of government, I had to look at it from how our people look at it, right? You know, one example is um, people started asking our community, what do you need from data? Like, what are your data needs? And they did the best they could to answer the questions. And I think they were able to sort of get reasonable responses from them. But, sitting as the lead for the Data and Research Council for NOPO, I realized that that line of questioning is very Western centric. It's very academic focused. What you know what a better we need to find better ways to ask the community what they need. Like,
mhm.
what diseases hurt you? What diseases are hurting our community? And that then you take the data priorities from those line of questioning, you know and it's your job. If you want to sort of be a data scientist, it becomes your job to get that information from our people, because you understand what they're talking about, but you also understand how to look at it um, quantitatively, from an academic side, so that you can get the data they need to advocate for better conditions for us. And so that's where we've been deficient for a long, long time, is connecting our community with needs. We thought that if we just get people into academia, if we just became doctors, lawyers, engineers, and scientists, that's how we would reach the promised land. And COVID told us that's not true, right?
Right.
And so we have, for us to all come together to where we need to be, we need to do a lot better job of being able to talk to each other about it. you know and that's a different there's no training for that.
No.
There is no class that will tell you how to talk to community people, because that doesn't exist, right? And so these are things that we have to forge new paths together.
Yeah.
um, we have to we have to improve our community's capacity to articulate that part, and we also need them to not articulate it, to tell us in their own words what the community needs, and we do the translation part. We translate that into how to look for it. And so that's my soapbox.
Yes, that's a great soapbox. So we're grateful for, the data team. And we didn't realize either during the pandemic that data would really be a big portion of how we get our services and how we get the funding we need for the vaccine clinics, for the booster clinics, just geared towards Pacific Islanders. And, to get people that speak our language at these vaccine clinics. And so I am so grateful for the team that collects the data just for Pacific Islanders, because it's literally saving our lives. And people don't realize that like numbers is pretty much everything. Like we think we just have to go. I mean, we do have to go to the city, go to the county, go to the state, go to the government, but we've got to go with numbers.
Right.
So I'm grateful for the data team. So getting back to, I just wanted to let people know, and also that the vaccine is free. It doesn't matter whether you're a citizen or you don't have to have, you know what I mean? Like, I know some of our community is still a little hesitant because they think they've got to fill out a card saying whether or not they're a citizen, but it's free. The booster is free. Anyone, I believe 6 months and older can get it. We're really trying to, this holiday season, is really reach our elders and make sure that they don't get sick. Make sure that they're vaccinated. Make sure
Yeah.
that they get their booster, just to maintain, like you said, um, the vaccine, and also to protect our families. We don't want to go back to where we were 2 years ago. And so we encourage you, if you have any questions, please call your doctor, get professional advice. Don't get it off of, a
Oh,
cereal box.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yes. Yes. Like it's, well, yeah, be careful where you get your information from,
right,
Like
right,
if you're not going to get your chemo orders from them, then
right.
don't.
There you go.
I don't know if you would, if you're not ready for them to do surgery on you, mm, maybe not really. Save other stuff for them. Save the how do you get your pulingi recipe from them,
Right.
right?
Yes,
Right?
yes. Get all your dessert and food recipes from those
Right?
people,
You
but
know?
get all your medical advice from a
Yes.
doctor, a
Right.
medical profession. That's all we're asking you to do, and to make sure you stay safe this holiday season by getting your vaccine, getting your booster, contacting your doctor for accurate information. Um, Go to vaccines.gov to find a place near you. You just got to put in your zip code, and it'll direct you somewhere closer to you. Also, go to the CDC page where they're updating their information more frequently, right, Dr. Samoa? So,
Yep.
and before we let you go, what is coming up next for you? What are you doing next?
So we're um not I don't know if I'm doing terribly much. It's mostly fighting the data fight.
Yeah,
So there's a lot more things where, if someone asks you sort of like what their data, what do you think of data? Um please respond, like even if you know nothing about data, tell them that. Because like I said, we're not going to sort of figure out how to get our information unless we do it.
yeah.
Luckily for us, we have some amazing people that know how to do it. Niai Toto is a master
Oh my God.
at connecting community with um, resources, but also like being able to use what communities are prioritizing in their language, and translating that for federal agencies, and so that's a skill that I think we all need to do better at. um,
Right.
and so yeah.
We're grateful. We're great. Well, we're gonna let you go, but get your dinner before you get in trouble with, some particular husband.
Right, right.
I love
Well,
you, Nick. Thank you for your time this evening. We appreciate all the great information that you gave us.
oh, thank you guys, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Right. Be
Yes.
Dr.
careful. Be
Samoa.
careful about the gout.
Oh my gosh, not the
The
gout.
other
That's a
epidemic
whole
is
different.
coming, right?
That's like we need
Oh,
to do a show on gout, just
we
gout
do.
itself.
You
But
think, yeah, because that's the other pandemic during the holidays,
that's a pandemic that will never go away.
right? Right? People be like, no, I can live through it. I was like, okay.
Yeah, you go ahead. You go ahead. Thank you, Dr. Samoa, for your time.
Thank
Again, go to
you.
vaccines.gov, put in your zip code, check out the CDC page. Thank you, Dr. Samoa. We appreciate your time.